My wife cheated on me with her boss, then manipulated me into signing over all our $500, $0 inheritance. Now she's gone silent and fighting me over the house, claiming I owe her half of everything we never agreed on. I never thought I'd find myself in a situation like this. Honestly, I thought I knew better than anyone. We'd been married for 10 years, and for the most part I believed we had a solid life, good job, a nice house, a future we planned together. But then, out of nowhere, everything turned upside down, and I was by something I never saw coming, cheating on me with her boss, Mark. It was one of those moments where you think you're safe, secure in your routine, and suddenly everything shatters in an instant. It started subtly enough. At first, I noticed phone was always hidden, her excuses getting more flimsy. She'd say she was busy at work or she was just talking to her boss about some project, but I could tell something was off. She'd get defensive when I asked about her phone, change the subject quickly, or snap back with a bitchy attitude I'd never seen before. I'd catch her in little lies about her whereabouts. She'd tell me she was working late, but I'd find texts or emails from Mark that didn't quite add up. One evening, I decided to check her phone when she was in the shower. I wasn't snooping out of suspicion, just a gut feeling that something was wrong. And that's when I saw it. A string of messages between her and Mark talking about meeting up, working late, and even explicit stuff about their sex life. My stomach dropped. I couldn't believe what I was reading. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. It was clear she'd been lying to me for months. She'd been sneaking around, hiding things, and I had no idea. The worst part was that she'd been so convincing about her innocence. Whenever I confronted her, she'd spin some elaborate story, how Mark was just a boss, a friend, someone she was helping out with work. She'd call me paranoid, say I was overreacting, accuse me of mistrusting her. But the evidence was right there. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and furious all at once. How could she do this to me after all these years? I thought we had a good thing going, and now I was left questioning everything I thought I knew about her. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind was racing with questions. How long had this been going on? How could she lie so convincingly? Did she ever really love me? The anger started to bubble up, but underneath it all was a deep sadness. I felt like I'd been hit by a freight train. The woman I loved, the woman I trusted, had been cheating on me with her boss, someone she worked with every day. And to make it worse, she was manipulative about it, trying to gaslight me into thinking I was crazy or paranoid. I knew I had to confront her, but I wasn't sure what would happen next. All I knew was that my world was crumbling, and I was left standing in the wreckage, trying to figure out what to do. The next morning, I woke up feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. My head was pounding and my stomach was in knots. I kept replaying that night's discovery over and over in my mind. I couldn't believe she'd been lying to me for months. I'd always thought we had a good marriage, that we were solid. Turns out I was just blind. I remembered how she'd always be so quick to accuse me of mistrust, how she'd call me paranoid whenever I questioned her about her late nights or her strange phone habits. Now I saw the truth. She'd been cheating on me right under my nose. I knew I had to confront her. No more hiding, no more pretending I didn't know. I waited until she got home from work, trying to keep my composure. When she walked through the door, I looked her straight in the eyes and handed her the phone. "What is this? Care to explain?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Her face went pale for a moment, then she composed herself with that bitchy smirk she always used when she thought she was winning an argument. "Oh, that," she said, brushing past me casually. "It's nothing, just some work stuff. You're overthinking things as usual." Her tone was dismissive, but I wasn't buying it. I pressed her further and she finally snapped, "Look, I don't owe you an explanation. Mark and I are just friends. It's not like I cheated on you with some random guy. It's not a big deal." Her words hit me like a punch. I felt my blood boil. I could see the defiance in her eyes, the way she was trying to make me doubt myself. But I wasn't buying her bullshit anymore. I demanded she tell me the truth, and after a long, tense silence, she finally admitted they'd been seeing each other for months. She said it was just sex, that it didn't mean anything, and that Mark was just a bad influence. She claimed I was paranoid and jealous, that I was imagining things, but I knew better. I could see the guilt in her eyes, the way she avoided looking at me directly. It was a complete betrayal, and I felt like I'd been punched in the chest. How could she lie so convincingly? How could she betray me like this? The emotional impact hit me hard. I was angry, yes, but also hurt and confused. I kept asking myself how I hadn't seen it coming, how I'd been so blind. I felt like I'd been played, manipulated into thinking everything was fine. All I wanted was the truth, and instead I got a web of lies. I was furious at her for cheating, but I was also furious at myself for not noticing sooner. The trust we built over 10 years was gone, shattered in an instant. I didn't even know who she was anymore. I felt betrayed, broken, and completely lost in that moment. After that confrontation, everything changed. I couldn't look at the same way. The woman I'd loved, trusted, and built a life with had turned out to be someone else entirely, someone who lied and betrayed me for months. But what hurt more was how she tried to manipulate me afterward, spinning stories, acting innocent and blaming me for being paranoid. I felt like I'd been played for a fool, and I was furious at myself for not seeing the signs earlier. In the days that followed, I kept replaying everything in my head. All those little moments I'd ignored, her phone always hidden, her sudden mood swings, her dismissive attitude whenever I brought up her late nights at work. Now I realized she'd been sneaking around, lying to my face and convincing herself she was justified. I couldn't believe I'd been so blind. I trusted her with everything, and she'd thrown it all away for some meaningless sex with Mark, her boss. The emotional toll was heavy. I went from shock to anger, then to sadness. I'd sit alone in the house, wondering how I'd let this happen. I started questioning everything, my judgment, my worth, the future we'd planned. I kept asking myself how I could have been so naive. But the worst part was feeling like I was already losing her, even before she left. She was distant, cold, and dismissive, as if she didn't care about me anymore. I tried to talk to her, to get her to see what she was doing, but she just shrugged me off, saying I was overreacting or that I was controlling. Then came the realization that I couldn't stay silent anymore. I had to do something. I started researching what to do about infidelity, about how to protect myself financially and emotionally. I found out that had manipulated me into signing over some of our assets. She'd convinced me that I owed her, that she was entitled to half of everything because we were married. But I knew that wasn't how it worked. I hadn't agreed to any of it. She'd lied and twisted the truth, just like she did about everything else. I also discovered she'd been pushing me to sign some papers, claiming it was just a formality, that it was for our benefit. I signed without reading carefully. Turns out she'd manipulated me into giving her control over our inheritance. About $500, $0 we'd inherited from my parents. I felt sick. How could she do this? How could she take everything we'd worked for and turn it into her own advantage? I started to realize she'd been planning this all along, using her charm and lies to get what she wanted. And as her silence grew, I knew she was plotting her next move. I was left with a decision. Do I fight for what's rightfully mine? Do I confront her again? Or do I let her go and try to pick up the pieces? The betrayal cut deep, but I also knew I had to stand my ground. I couldn't let her manipulate me anymore. I started gathering evidence, texts, emails, bank statements, anything that would prove her lies. I knew I'd have to go to a lawyer, maybe even take her to court. The thought of fighting her for what's mine made my stomach churn, but I couldn't let her get away with this. Not after everything. It was clear that game wasn't over. She was fighting me over the house now, claiming I owed her half of everything we never agreed on. She's gone silent, refusing to answer calls and blocking my texts. I don't know what she's planning, but I do know one thing: she's not getting away with it. I've realized that the woman I married was just a mask she wore, and now I'm trying to figure out how to reclaim what's rightfully mine. The pain is still fresh, but I'm determined to see this through. This isn't just about money, it's about respect, integrity, and justice. The more I dug into what was doing behind my back, the angrier I got. Every new piece of evidence was like a punch to the gut, but also a wake-up call. I found out she'd been funneling money into accounts I didn't know about, probably planning to disappear with it. That's when I realized this wasn't just a case of cheating. It was a carefully orchestrated scheme to take everything I had. and she was doing it all while pretending to be the innocent victim. I decided I couldn't let her get away with manipulating me any longer. I hired a lawyer, someone who knew the ins and outs of divorce law and asset protection. I showed him everything I had, those incriminating texts, the bank statements, the signed documents I'd been pressured into signing. It was clear had been working overtime to stack the deck in her favor. She lied about her intentions, lied about her feelings, and most of all, lied about how much she actually cared. She'd been using her charm and her boss's influence to get what she wanted, my inheritance, my house, and control over everything we'd built together. She still refused to talk to me directly. Instead, she sent a series of bitchy texts claiming I owed her half of everything because we're married, and that I was just a jealous, controlling husband. She called me paranoid and accused me of ruining her life, but I wasn't buying her lies anymore. I knew she was just trying to cover her tracks, trying to make me look like the bad guy so she could walk away with everything. I was starting to see her for who she really was, a manipulative, selfish woman who'd do anything to get her way. Meanwhile, she was fighting me over the house. She claimed I owed her half of the value, even though we never agreed on that. She argued that because we'd been married so long, she deserved a fair share of everything, including the inheritance and the house. She played the victim, crying about how she deserves her fair share after all these years. But I knew better. I knew she was just trying to grab what she could before I caught her completely off guard. I wasn't going to let her do that. I had the proof of her infidelity, her lies, and her manipulation. I was determined to fight for what was rightfully mine. I also started to realize how much this whole thing had broken me emotionally. I was angry, yes, but underneath that, I was hurt. I'd trusted her for so long, and now I felt like I didn't even know who she was. The woman I married, the woman I thought I loved, had turned into a stranger who used me, lied to me, and tried to steal everything I had. It was a harsh lesson in betrayal, but I also knew I couldn't let her get away with it. I had to stand up for myself, for what was legally mine, and for the dignity I still had left. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal battles, accusations, and heavy emotions. I was constantly on edge, waiting for her next move. She was silent most of the time, probably plotting her next strategy or trying to figure out how to get around the legal system. I stayed calm, gathering more evidence and preparing myself for a fight. I realized that this wasn't just about money anymore. It was about respect and integrity. I had to take back control of my life, and I was determined not to let her manipulate me into submission. I knew she was trying to push me into giving up, but I refused to be a victim. This was my life, and I was going to fight for it. The legal process dragged on, and every day felt like walking on a razor's edge. Silence was deafening, but I knew her tactics. She was trying to wear me down, to make me doubt myself, to get me to give up. She kept claiming I owed her half of everything, including the house, the inheritance, and anything else she could spin into her favor. But I had the evidence now, and I knew I had to fight smart. I hired a private investigator to dig into her financials and her movements. It turned up some surprising things. She'd been meeting with Mark even more secretly, and there were accounts I didn't recognize that she'd opened in my name to hide assets. When I finally sat down with my lawyer and showed him everything, he told me I had a solid case. Had been manipulating me into signing documents I hadn't read properly, and she'd been laundering money through those secret accounts. Her plan had been to squeeze me dry, take the house, and walk away with her lover and the inheritance. I couldn't believe how calculated she'd been. It made me sick to think I'd been so blind, so trusting. But now I was determined to fight back and protect what was mine. One of the most explosive moments came when finally decided to face me directly. She showed up at my house unexpectedly, her face twisted with anger and contempt. She accused me of ruining her life, crying crocodile tears about how I was just jealous and controlling. She told me I owed her half of everything, and that I'd better stop fighting or else. Her words were venomous, but I stood my ground. I told her I wasn't going to be played anymore, that I had all the proof I needed. I told her that I was going to take her to court and get everything sorted legally. That day, I realized how much I'd been emotionally drained. I'd gone from heartbreak to rage, from betrayal to determination. I'd spent years building a life I thought was solid, and now I was fighting to keep what was rightfully mine. It wasn't just about the money or the house. It was about my dignity. She had manipulated me into signing over our inheritance, trying to turn my own assets against me. I knew I had to be relentless to stop her. I couldn't let her get away with this, even if it meant a long, ugly legal battle. Meanwhile, she kept fighting me over the house, claiming I owed her half of its value, even though I had never agreed to that. She was pushing every button she could, trying to make me doubt myself, trying to make me give up. But I refused. I knew the truth, and I knew I had the law on my side. I kept pushing forward, preparing for the court hearings, collecting more evidence, and making sure I was ready. I knew she was banking on me giving in, but I wasn't about to let her win. This was about justice, and I was determined to get it. The emotional toll was heavy, but I was stronger than her manipulations. I had to be. The court date finally arrived after what felt like an eternity of legal wrangling, accusations, and sleepless nights. I sat there in the courtroom, feeling a mixture of exhaustion and resolve. Was across from me, her face cold and defiant, trying to look the part of the innocent victim, but I saw right through her. She thought she could manipulate her way out of this, but I had the evidence. Her lies, her secret accounts, her affair with Mark, that proved she'd been planning this betrayal for months. When the judge asked the questions, I laid it all out clearly. I explained how had manipulated me into signing over our inheritance, how she'd been lying about her relationship with Mark, and how she'd been secretly funneling money into accounts I didn't even know existed. I presented the texts, the bank statements, the signed documents, everything that painted her as the scheming, manipulative person she'd become. I could see her trying to look innocent, but it was no use. The evidence was damning. His lawyer made a last-ditch effort, claiming there was some kind of marital agreement or that I owed her half because of our long marriage, but the judge shut that down quickly. The law is clear. You can't manipulate someone into signing away their assets, and infidelity complicates things further. I could see the frustration in his eyes as she realized her plan was unraveling. She tried to argue that she deserved a share of the house, but I had proof that she'd been trying to sell it behind my back, that she'd been planning to leave with everything. When the judge finally ruled in my favor, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. I was awarded full control of the house, the inheritance, and the assets had tried to hide. It wasn't just about the money, it was about reclaiming my dignity and standing up to her manipulations. She was furious, shouting that I was destroying her life, but I didn't care. Justice was served, and I finally felt like I could breathe again. In the aftermath, I moved out of the house she was fighting over. I started rebuilding piece by piece. I've learned a lot from this ordeal. Trust is fragile, and you have to watch out for the signs of manipulation. I now know that even the people closest to you can betray you when they think they can get away with it. I've also realized that standing up for yourself is crucial, even if it's painful. Sometimes you have to fight for what's right, no matter how hard it gets. Looking back, I wish I'd seen the signs sooner, but I also know I did everything I could to protect myself and my future. The betrayal hurt, but it also taught me a valuable lesson. Never ignore your instincts, and always be aware of how people might manipulate you when they see an opportunity. I hope sharing this will help others recognize the warning signs before it's too late. Trust is earned, and when it's broken, sometimes the only way to heal is to stand your ground and fight for what you deserve.